All right, hey everybody, happy Thursday to you. I just wanted to remind you tomorrow we have a Bible class at 10 o'clock in the morning. And so if you want to dig in a little bit, Luke chapter 24, that story about the road to Emmaus, that will be the basis for our Bible study tomorrow. If you're looking for a little bit of a devotional thing, perhaps to just dig into that before the Bible study and also for our service on Sunday. When I was back living in South Dakota, there was this band called Lost and Found. Many of you guys know Lost and Found. They are oftentimes at the National Youth Gathering, and so I've dragged our kids in the past to watch some concerts with them, but just fun. They've got a fun angle at the way they sing their songs. And their whole story is pretty amazing. You could find them certainly on the internet if you look up Lost and Found. So Michael and George have been entertaining for many, many years. But I'd take you back to a story back in when we were up in Brookings, South Dakota. We went to a concert one evening with them. If my mind remembers, it was a little bit of a snowy evening that we went up there, and as we were gathered up there, we took in one of their amazing concerts. And right in the middle of this song, Michael gave a pretty cool testimony of what this scripture means, especially to him. And so again, it's a little bit long of an audio segment afterwards, about 17 minutes, and I'm probably rambling on already long enough, and we're going to go and cut to that. But I think it's kind of cool, and maybe it's something that you just have to be there, but yet at the same time it gives a little bit of an insight into this particular section of Scripture. So hopefully you take some time and enjoy that. God's blessings on the rest of your Thursday, and we'll see you tomorrow at 10. Bye.
What Caesar calls his own, and everybody goes, hearts on fire. Let the one who is without a sin throw the first stone, and everybody goes, hearts on fire. Hearts on fire, baby, yeah, and hearts on fire. Hearts on fire, baby, yeah, and hearts on fire. She is only sleeping, though you thought that she died, and everybody said, hearts on fire. Take a look here at my hands and my feet, put your hand in my side, and everybody's all, hearts on fire. Hearts on fire, baby, yeah, and hearts on fire. Hearts on fire, baby, yeah, and hearts on fire. Okay, now maybe it'd be fun to sing this one together. All you have to do on this song is say, hearts on fire. Let me hear you say, hearts on fire. That is so perfect. So what happens on the song? Okay, let me back up again. Thing is, hearts on fire, you know where the phrase comes from, right? When we sing this song, hearts on fire, like the baby part is just for syllables. But the hearts on fire comes from that story in the book of Luke. Do you remember that story where the disciples are walking on the way to that place called Emmaus? You remember that story? No. Okay, let me back way up. The thing is, the disciples are walking on the road to this town. The name of the town is not important, but what is important is that the one in whom they'd hoped, the one in whom they'd believed, the one with whom they'd fallen in love, the one for whom they'd waited so long, has been brutally murdered. You remember that part of the story. And then they're walking on the road, and they run into the stranger. The stranger's like, what up? And, or, you know, whatever the stranger would say. And the stranger says, what's the matter? They say, the one in whom we hoped, the one for whom we waited, the one with whom we'd fallen in love, the one in whom we trusted, has been brutally murdered. And then they discover that that stranger is the one who was dead and now is alive, right? It's the resurrected Christ of God. And when they discover that on the road, you know, what do? They don't go like, "Ah!" which you totally expect him to do. Rather, quite the contrary, they say, "Did not our hearts burn within us?" It was sort of like they were so subtle that way. They said, "Did not our hearts burn within us?" It was their phrase that sort of meant, weren't we in the presence of the resurrected Christ of God? I think that'd be cool if that were our secret phrase. You know how, like, you go to a youth gathering or summer camp or something, you have a really great time, and you come home and your parents and your friends are like, "How was it?" And I know what we always say. We say, "It was fun." You know, because it's the only phrase we have. Oh, I've been to summer camp. And though I love summer camp, you know, it's like, you know, you're sleeping in teepees and stuff like that. It's not, it's not roller coasters and water slides, but there's something remarkable about it. I think it'd be cool if we came home and, like, our friends and family, our parents were like, "How was it?" And we'd say, "Did not our hearts burn within us?" Because in that place, we experienced the very presence of the resurrected Christ of God in the way that we loved one another. I'll tell you what happened to me. First time I experienced that was, I'll try to make a short story boring. What happened was, I was 15 years old, and so I drove around some cars that did not belong to me. And before I could return them, in this case to the dealership, the police, you know, they pulled me over, and so the technical term was arrest. And they took me to the station where they, you know, the police take teenagers, and they did what the police do when they take 15-year-olds to the police station. You know, they made my mom cry, and they threatened me with all manner of dire consequences. But then they said, well, maybe there's hope for Michael. And they said, well, rather than send you off to the penitentiary or whatever they do, they said I could be on what they called probation. And probation was this arrangement where every single night I had to be in the house at 8:00 p.m. Every night for 3 months. For 3 months, I had to be in the house at 8:00 Eastern time. And so that's where I lived. So you can imagine it's like 5:00 in California where I live now. And so I had to be in at 8:00 every night for 3 months. And once a week I had to go see my probation guy. His name was Blair. And it's funny, his name was Blair, so every time I talked to him, I'd be like, "Hey, Blair!" Because, you know, his name was Blair, and he never really got it. But, you know, it allowed me a weekly dose of amusement. And so I would go in, I'd see him, and I had to be in the house every night at 8:00 for 3 months, and I got caught doing this in May. And I don't know how it works here where you live, but where we grew up in New York, we only had 3 months a year off school. We had June, July, and August. And this all happened to me the last week in May. So for June, July, and August, I had to be home at 8:00 p.m. every single night. Well, my mom, she could see that I was bummed. She was like, "Hey, Mike, you're bummed." We're from Buffalo. That's how we talk. Like, my mom would be like, "Hey, Mike, hey." That's just our accent. That's how we talk in Buffalo. We're like, "Hockey night in Buffalo. Aw, man, didn't we go to high school together? Ah, I was tired." And so anyway, my mom, she's like, "Hey, Mike, you're bummed." I was like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Why don't you go to the camp that our church works with during the summer? Go to the church camp for a week." I was like, "Oh, no way." And then I realized if I went to the camp, I could get away with something. Because I thought that'd be cool. I could go to the camp and I wouldn't have to be in the house at 8:00. Like, how absurd would that be? Everybody's like going to the beach for devotions and stuff, and I'd be like, I got to go back to my tent. You know what I mean? At 8:00 and wait on the cell phone for Blair to call. So I thought I could get away with something. So I told my mom, I was like, "All right, I'll go." So I went down and I asked Blair, I was like, "Hey, Blair, can I go to camp for a week?" And he was like, "Sure." Now, actually, he was like, "Sure," because he thought I was hard of hearing. I never told him otherwise because I could use the sympathy. And so he said, "Sure, I could go." And so I went. I went to camp, and it was really funny when I got to camp because all the counselors were sitting around the picnic tables, and I walked through the gate, and my mom was like, "Have a good time." I was like, "Ugh, I won't." But that was just my job when I was 15, was to pretend I didn't like stuff. Even if I liked it, I had to pretend I didn't like it because it was my job, and I took it seriously. I was good at it. So my mom was like, "Have a great time." I was like, "Ugh, I won't." So I walk in, here's the counselors sitting around the table singing their songs. They're like, "It only takes a spark to get a fire going." And I got my guitar with me, and I'm trying to play along. We're in different worlds because I'm playing along. I'm like, And so there we were, and the counselors, like, I just kind of tried to cause a lot of trouble, and, whatever. We had this week, and we invented our own secret words. We'd say this word, we'd say things like ya, and that would have special meaning to us within the confines of our 11 acres. And then we'd leave, and we'd go home, and, secretly I had a great time. And my mom was like it was the last day, we were getting ready to leave, before my mom came and picked me up, and we were getting ready to leave. And I noticed, I was like, goodbye, nice to meet you, goodbye, great week, okay, goodbye. And I noticed a lot of the other campers, they were like crying and sobbing, like, and they were sobbing and crying. And I was like, what is up with you? We've only known each other for 5 days. And I couldn't understand it. And that was that. And my mom was like, how was it? And I was like, I hated it. And so she knew I was fine. So anyway, the counselors called up my mother on the phone, and they said, hey, Mike's mom, these are the counselors. And they said, if you send Mike back to camp for a week, we'll pay for it. And it was like really stunning because we didn't have any money when I was growing up or anything. And so like the counselors, they got together and they pooled their money. They called up my mom, and even though I was like the total trouble causer, they said, we'll if you invite Michael back, if you let Michael come back to camp, we'll pay for it. And I couldn't believe it because you know how it is working in camp. I don't know if any of you ever worked at camp, but counselors only make like $6.50 a week, right? And so they pool their money, and so my mom's like, hey, Mike, it's the counselors. They said you can go back to camp, and they'll pay for it. And I was like, all right, I'll go. I mean, I might as well condescend to attend camp for another week. So I go, and I get there. Now, this time I come, I knew how to, really get involved. I brought firecrackers and some stuff like that, an electric guitar and everything. So anyway, there I am, and we used to play this game every morning between breakfast and lunch. The whole activity on camp was we'd break into small groups, and we'd play this game. It was like Truth or Dare, but we were at camp, so it was just truth. And we would, you could ask each other any question you wanted, and the only rule is you had to answer honestly or just say, I don't want to answer. That's what it was. And we'd ask each other everything. If you could only take one thing to heaven, what would you take? We'd be like, our stereo, and counselor would be like, there's no electricity or whatever, Or you could choose to take electricity or whatever. Anyway, there's all kinds of different things. We'd ask, we found out everything about each other. You know how those games are? We found out everything we'd ever done, it was really sweet. And we'd always ask, what's the most important thing in your life? Then I remember some people would say school, and some people would say family, friends, whatever. And I remember they asked me, I said, happiness is important, And it was the last day. It wasn't really the last day. It was the morning of the last full day before the final half morning. You know how camp works, right? It was like the penultimate morning, and we gathered together, and we had our counselor in the middle where we could ask him any question we wanted. Dave was his name. In fact, it still is his name. And we had him in the middle, and we could ask him anything we wanted. And we were kind of afraid of him and everything because he was really old. 21 he was. And we could ask him questions. We asked him everything about what he does at college and all kinds of different, everything. And he was totally honest. He just told us everything. We were like, wow, it's totally amazing. We asked him, Dave, what's the most important thing in your life? And he goes, Jesus. It's the most important thing in my life. We never have met anyone who said anything like that. And he was our friend. He didn't have to say that. He totally did. And we were like stunned. We were sore afraid. And so we left him alone for the rest of the day. And he said, he and a couple of guys, the counselors, came to me. They said, hey, Michael, hey, Mike, it's the last night, and we're having devotions on the beach tonight. Do you want to play your guitar with us for devotions? I was like, all right. I'll bring my guitar down there, play a little, Sanctuary or something. And so I bring my guitar down. We're all sitting there, and it's a big camp. It wasn't just a camp for teenagers. It was a family camp. It was like there were like teenagers, but there were also children. There were mothers and fathers. There were seniors in the high school and seniors like my parents. And they were all together. And even Concordia professors would be there. And everyone is there. And we're gathered on the beach, hundreds of us. And we were sitting on these logs and singing songs. And the counselors were playing. They were playing like, everybody ought to know. And the whole camp is arrayed just like this. And there's just like 3 of us sitting on these huge big logs. And there's a big fire here. And they're singing, everybody ought to know who Jesus is. And I'm playing, I'm kind of like over there. They're like, everybody ought to know. Everybody ought to know. And I'm over there going. Everybody ought to know. And then all of a sudden, I noticed everyone was looking, and I was like, and just as I was like, I fell straight back over this log. And my guitar, was like on my stomach, and I didn't want to get sand in my guitar and stuff, and my feet were straight up. The only thing you'd see was like the soles of my feet after I just disappeared. And there I was gone, and I was so totally embarrassed because I'd finally done it. I'd attracted the entire attention of the whole camp. That's what I wanted. And I thought everybody would be like, ah! He thought he was so cool, and there he is now falling over on the log. And it's amazing. I was so embarrassed. I didn't want to even stand up. And I remember all I could kind of hear is, people singing it. My friend Dave, counselor, he just reached over, pulled me back up, and I sat up on the log. I'm totally playing along. I'm like, everybody ought to know who Jesus is. And it sounds kind of corny now, years after the fact, but I remember that in that minute, I knew better than I did minutes before who Jesus is, because it occurred to me that these counselors loved me not because I was cool, because, believe me, I wasn't. They loved me not because I could play the guitar, because I couldn't. I barely can now. And they loved me not because I was like, it's not even like they loved me because I was your basic upstanding, law-abiding citizen of their community, because I wasn't. It wasn't even like they loved me because I was paying them $200 a week to come to camp so they could pretend to love me, because I wasn't. It was just like they loved me because they knew that Jesus had loved them first. And they believed it so much that they were able and willing to make it real in my life. And they did. They made it real for me in that way. And I remember it was the next morning, it was the final morning, it was time to leave. We all had to leave. And everybody was like, goodbye, goodbye, bye-bye. And I was totally like, I'm crying and I'm sobbing. I didn't know what to do. I'm just crying the whole time, like, oh, I can't believe it. I don't want to leave. I love you guys. And I wish I'd known then what I know now, because on the last morning, I would have just turned to them. I would have said, did not our hearts burn within us? Because in that place, we experienced the very presence of the resurrected God when we loved one another. Hearts on fire, baby, yeah. Hearts on fire. Hearts on fire, baby, yeah. Hearts on fire. Render unto Caesar what Caesar calls his own, and everybody's all hearts on fire. Let the one who is without his sin throw the first stone, and everybody goes hearts on fire. Hearts on fire, baby, yeah. Hearts on fire. Hearts on fire, baby, yeah. Hearts on fire. Why are you looking for the living among the dead? Everybody said, hearts on fire. Drink this new wine and eat this living bread. And everybody said, hearts on fire.